Is Demetra going to join us today?
She's like Deanna's here.
Pardon?
It's like Deanna's here.
Yeah, he's there. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the late start. We just had to switch rooms, but I believe
Yes, we have a quorum.
we have a quorum right now. So we can jump right in to the agenda.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Joan McIntyre, speaking, Chair of the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. Just want to go ahead and start with the usual introductions. So we'll start with the room here and then go to the people online.
Hi, I'm Cindy Lewin, Commission member.
Rob Sandola, Commissioner.
I'm Doug Snellenboss, member of the Commission and also Chair of the Energy Committee.
Jonathan Morgenstein, member of the Commission and a member of the committee.
Hi, Eric Gibbs, Commissioner.
Mark Greenwood, Commissioner.
Kevin Vincent, I'm a member of the Commission.
Elizabeth Whitney, Commissioner.
Jenna Peabody, Air Team.
And Joe?
Joe Trevent, member of the public.
Okay, David?
David Evans, Commissioner.
Okay, Dan? Dan, you want to just test your audio too?
Hey, Dan McGee with Red Brick LMD.
Great. Judith?
Hello, Judith Collins. I'm with the League of Women Voters, Arlington, Alexandria City.
And Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Hall. I'm just a member of the public listening in. That's it. Thank you.
Welcome. Happy to have you. Anybody else? I thought I saw Stephen on. Okay, we'll get that. Does anybody have public comments? Okay, no public comments. Then we can just go to the December meeting updates if people had a chance to look at it.
Madam Chair, I have a couple comments.
Yeah, I made a few things. I think Jenna corrected them.
I want to thank Jenna for a much improved version with the paragraphs much easier to read. Thank you very much. Typos cut down significantly. Excellent. I would suggest there's in certain places it kind of jumps back and forth between past tense and current tense. I would just stick with past tense every time for consistency. And then I wouldn't hesitate to identify individual speakers. Like if somebody has a question, you just say, Bill had a question on such and such, and so this person answered it. So it's kind of a narrative, but don't hesitate to name names. And then the one thing that seemed to be left out was when I brought to Tux's attention the issue about the real estate tax exemption for solar projects. And I think that was the first time he had heard about that issue, and he expressed a moderate amount of interest in it. So I think that'd just be worth like adding 2 sentences. Like one, it was brought to his attention, and 2, you know, he indicated interest and said he would follow up with the county manager.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else? I would say for this one, you know, just kind of make those changes on the tax incentives, and then the next go right agenda, or for this month and forward, you can kind of look at the formatting and then that kind of stuff. I'd have a motion to approve.
Moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that's done. And now we're happy to turn to Dan McKee. He is an associate at Red Brick, which is a real estate company in DC, and they're doing a lot of development where they're aiming for getting zero carbon certification. So I thought, you know, getting a sense of his experience of, you know, how they're going about doing that, what are the challenges they face, as well as then what are some of the incentives and things that we can think about as we look at the updated green building incentive policy as to, you know, what strategies might work to kind of really push the envelope on getting developers. So turn it over to you.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you, Joan. Yeah, and if at any point, you know, feel free to ask questions. We can make it a bit more of a dialogue if instead of just me talking. So I think I'm going to focus primarily on the building called the Douglas, which is under construction now. It is the largest building in the world pursuing ILFI zero carbon certification, the largest multifamily building in the world. I should add that qualifier. And we're going to use it. I'm going to speak a little bit as a case study to kind of give you a sense of, we are a private for-profit developer, and we are achieving heavy decarbonization in real estate development. And I think I'll focus a bit, I think the agenda for this presentation, it'll go a bit of, who, what, how, and why. I'll focus a bit more on the how and why to give you a sense of, what's going on in our minds, in the private sector as we attempt to decarbonize. A bit about Red Brick. We are a DC-based, as I mentioned, private for-profit real estate development. We have a couple different pipeline, projects in our pipeline. I'm going to be speaking exclusively today about the Bridge District, which is all said and done going to be about 1.5 million square feet, or sorry, 2.5 million square feet of mixed-use development. It is right on the other side of the new Frederick Douglass Bridge. The whole site is going to be built to a zero carbon standard. And so the first phase of that is the first phase of the Bridge District is what we're calling the Douglas. It's including the parking garage. This one in itself is about 1 million square feet, 757 units of multifamily rental. The land here is all opportunity zone, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on the Opportunity Zone Act, but the biggest piece is that it incentivizes us to develop for a long-term hold. So we are planning to hold this asset once it finishes construction for a minimum of 10 years. We're looking a bit longer than that, but that piece in itself really, because we're holding this asset for such a long period, we are very motivated to think about the long-term value creation with this development, and not just build it for as cheaply as possible and flip it. We are very invested in not only the future of what this asset has itself, but the future of the community as a whole. So that community aspect is a very large piece of what we do at Red Brick. Now, just talking specifically on the decarbonization side, we look at it from a total carbon life cycle approach.
Just quickly ask one question. When you say you're going to retain it, does that mean that you'll be renting out the units, or you're going to own the building in general, but there'll be condo units within being sold? The first one you mentioned, we will be owning the building. We will maintain ownership and manage the. We're going to hire a partner to actually manage the property, because we don't have asset management in our team. But they are rentals, so we will own it for rental for that whole period. So looking at the total decarbonization, we look at it from a total life cycle approach. First, in this order, first, we say, we kind of admit we're going to fully account for the carbon emissions throughout the project's entire life cycle, and that's all the way from mining of raw material or collection of raw material, all the way through a decommissioned state at the end of the building's, quote unquote, lifetime. I'll get a bit into the granular piece of what all this means. But the second piece is take a reduction first approach. As we start to budget our carbon
emissions throughout this process. First, try to reduce as much as feasibly possible, and then only then, after we've reduced, go to the offset those emissions that we're generating through. On the embodied carbon side, it'll be a one-time offset purchase, but then once the building's opened, we are going to be operating this building and it's going to be powered 100% by renewable energy. This approach generally matches the ILFI zero carbon certification, and which is why we chose this specific certification to pursue. The Douglas is the first phase of this bridge district development that's pursuing this certification, but we plan to get the entire all the phases of the bridge district project certified through this ILFI certification.
Question?
Yep.
When you say operational energy will be provided 100% by renewables, is that on site, or are you just committed to purchasing?
Yep, combination of on site and off site. We've maximized we basically loaded up the rooftop with the roof space with as much solar power as we can. At the urban scale that we're building, that equates to about 2 to 3% of our energy use. And so we are in active negotiations with some local solar renewable developers that are going to we're going to become an off taker for some of their developments. We will be buying a bundled power plus renewable energy credit as part of that. We think the unbundled rec market is a bit too murky to because we just can't track where it's coming from, right? And so that's kind of a core problem that we have. So we're going a bit more directly to the source and trying to find trying to locate a specific bundled product.
Okay.
Where we
Thank you.
Sorry, another clarifying question. In that same vein, how much negotiation do you need to do with Pepco to be allowed to sort of chart your own destiny with respect to the offsite generation?
Yeah, they are involved. It is a part. The deregulation of the supply side has helped that quite a bit. Where we do have the right to locate our sources as long as the solar developer cooperates with Pepco on the generation side. And so that actually, I think the offsite solar developer takes a lot of that regulatory component off of our hands, which is nice.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Yep. And so getting a bit more granular on the life cycle approach. As I mentioned, we are tracking all the way from raw material supply. So if we're mining aluminum somewhere to make an envelope product or something, we are tracking that and accounting for that in our life cycle calculation. We are using a carbon accounting program called Athena to do this life cycle approach, to track it. As we've during the design process, we loaded it with a bunch of assumptions on what we think we're gonna install, and they're based on very real numbers on how much we think. As we've been constructing and actually installing products in place, we've been replacing those budgeted assumptions with the actual installed quantities and installed carbon footprint of those products. We are demanding every product that comes on site, and or anybody that wants to sell us a product to get built into this project, we are asking for an environmental product declaration from them, and if they don't have an EPD associated with that product, we've actually helped a few suppliers make one. It's a bit of a process, but even if they're using some some base assumptions on what they're doing, it's a good start, and it's better than nothing. So it is a bit of a learning process, all the way from the suppliers through the contractors through even internal to Red Brick on what this means. But the goal is to try to figure out like a true carbon footprint of this building all the way through end of life stage, decommissioning. We've assumed a 50-year lifespan on this, just because that seems to be industry standard on these life cycle carbon life cycle calculations. I think we've taken into some pretty conservative, even though we don't plan to be holding the asset after 50 years, we've taken some conservative assumptions on what happens at it, assuming that it'll get demolished or whatever it is for that material.
How do you account for kind of negative emissions where you're kind of storing carbon?
We have on the Douglas, we do have some carbon sequestering concrete. We basically took I guess it's called a +0+0 approach as opposed to the -1+1, where we're not taking a minus credit for it in the beginning, but then we also don't have to take a hit at the end of life stage, if that makes sense. And so it basically means we're not whereas say if we were sequestering carbon for for 30 years, some groups would take a -1 approach where they take credit for it but then have to give it back at the end of life. On the Douglas, we took a +0+0 approach on that.
I'm not an expert in this sector, and so I had never heard of LIFE.
Zero carbon certification.
Zero carbon certification.
Yep.
It does sound pretty freaking complicated. And so I'm just curious, does the institution provide guidance to you it's one thing for you to account for everything you're doing, but then also good on you for forcing the issue all the way up the supply chain. But like you were describing a moment ago, where you're asking a supplier to come to you with, up their supply chain carbon accountings, do they help a developer like yourselves to do those sorts of things?
They do, and they even make it because we'll ask for that environmental product declaration, which basically means they have to backtrack through that, like you mentioned, right. They have to backtrack through their entire supply chain to kind of go through it. There's different levels of those. There's different levels of intensity of those environmental product declarations. So if say some supplier is not as sophisticated, they can go into there's some databases where they can go into and make very reasonable assumptions based on what they're getting, right. and that might be the first iteration of their environmental product declaration, where it's purely based on assumptions, but it's based on the quantities that they use in that product, but yeah. Totally based on historical assumptions on
the average of this exactly. Kind of metal being used in this way.
Exactly. And then as you know, a more sophisticated supplier, we've approached a number of suppliers that this is already in their radar. And they said, yep, we do have a few clients that ask for these, and they've gone through the whole ordeal. They might have some combination of actual prime data, and some assumptions still baked into there. And so there's different levels based on how sophisticated they are. Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. And so from let's see, let me get back here. And so I'll kind of split the rest of this. So there's kind of two main components to this. One is embodied carbon emissions through construction. So how much emissions are we generating to just actually get the building open? And then once the building's opened, there's an operating energy use associated with that. And so I'll kind of split the rest of this presentation into those two parts, where we'll talk about construction. So this is a picture of the building site last summer. If you drive by, we've gotten pretty high. I think we're pouring floor 9 this week. And so it's up there. It is a full height building per DC, which is 130 feet. And about 12, 13 stories above grade, if you include the penthouse. Overall, we threw every, it is a type 1 construction, meaning the structure is made out of concrete and steel. We threw almost everything at the wall on this one to try to reduce our embodied carbon, and we made we made some pretty big reductions in the embodied carbon. I refer to this EC3 baseline. EC3 is another carbon tracking database, specifically for the embodied carbon side of the industry. And so it's actually a really useful tool. Even if you're at conceptual planning, you can just say, like, I have a building, 400,000 square feet. It's going to be made out of concrete, maybe like 1 or 2 stories below grade of parking, and it will spit out, based even that level of detail, it'll spit out an industry standard for like hyper local to our specific DC region. How much if we were to just build this thing, how much emissions do we think the industry standard would emit? And so that's what we've been tracking against to try to reduce that as much as possible. The big piece is concrete. I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody, but concrete is the is the big elephant in the room when it comes to embodied carbon. And so that's the primary focus of what we worked on for embodied carbon. Going on that, here's kind of a sample. We have a weekly meeting with HIT Construction, who's our general contractor on this building. They have a team dedicated to helping us and their other clients that are tracking embodied carbon. We're not the only one, which is a good sign. And we go through that. We went through this meticulously on how do we get the exact strength that we need at the exact location of the building. And so, this is like page 1 of 4 or 5 of our concrete mixes, where we split the concrete mix into hundreds of different mixes, instead of just over specifying and saying, hey, we need to just hit, X PSI strength across the whole building. We really drilled it down to what is exactly needed at that component of the building. And it's not like it's going to fall down. There's still good safety factor in this, but we're trying to eliminate the amount of cement that we need to pump into this building unnecessarily if we don't need to. And so, it's a complex thing to track. HIT Construction does a really good job of it. We did utilize in order to help hit these targets. We did utilize an on-site batch plant so that they didn't have to, and the surprising piece was we thought the big savings in emissions would be from the reduction of concrete trucks that are moving back and forth from like the plant 100 miles away and the site. But in reality, it was the fact that it's so like the concrete mix production is happening so close to the site that the concrete subcontractor just feels so much better about hitting that exact mix perfectly, because I guess if they have to truck it and send it like 100 miles away, they will overshoot their mix strength just so that they can make sure that in the on-site field installed condition it hits the specified strength. So yeah, overall we've been able to achieve a 36% reduction in the concrete component to date. This is the tracker from December, from December, so pretty recently. It's I think given the type 1 construction, mostly concrete and steel, with the absence of like new technology of like carbon sequestering concrete that can that can reduce our carbon emissions further. This is like we threw everything at the wall. But so we're proud of that. We're proud of that 36% reduction.
Yep. So that's 36%, 0.4% reduction in carbon emissions in the embedded carbon. What percentage, I guess, fewer tons of actual concrete? I mean, did this not only saved carbon emissions, but this saved actual materials going into the building, right? Like
that is a good point, because we've been tracking it, and there's probably some report, I guess we probably haven't captured all of the reductions that we've gotten, because we're using, when we go to plug in, relative to the database, we plug in the actual amount of concrete that we are putting in, just using a more industry standard. And so we did, during the design, we did have specific, we made specific measures to try to reduce the total amount of concrete. But we at those design points, we didn't carry like, we didn't say like, okay, we're gonna carry like an alternate version of this building, so it's like, I think there might have been some savings there that's like just not even reported here, if that makes sense.
And Daniel, did this save you money or cost you money to take this approach?
This approach, the on-site batch plant ended up, this whole approach ended up actually saving us money on the concrete. Now we are doing this, I will say we are doing this at the scale of, we're building 1 million square feet. I think if this were a smaller job, that
less replicable.
Yes, that on-site batch plant looks a lot less, because we had to pay an upfront, we paid an upfront fee to basically install the batch plant, and then after that we had some savings. We had some savings while they were pouring concrete, because reduced trucking, reduced transportation, and all of that. And so it worked. This one worked in our favor due to the scale. But I think as you get to smaller buildings, probably not as replicable with using the batch plant. There are still some ways in which you can replicate the breaking out the mix like we did without any real cost impact.
Great.
Joe, quick question on building lifespan. We've done calculations if you built this building to last 100 years instead of 50 years. I'm not sure if that what industry standard is, but if you had the carbon embodied for longer in the building, and would that change any of your construction methods or the strength you'd have to use for the concrete or your calculations for the life cycle carbon emissions of the building?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know if I don't know if it's I don't know if I have a full answer for it, but it's we calculated a 50-year lifespan in the carbon accounting process. We did not go in and say like we're going to build a 50-year building. We fully expect this building to last 100 years if the structure if the new owners want it to. I think it's a bit more of like we have to, if we're gonna cut off the carbon accounting process, like we just have to like pick a date, and I think it's a bit more arbitrary on that 50 years.
Okay, got it.
And then in the other categories, we're still putting up structure, so that's what we have more solid reduction confidence in, because it's more installed condition. As we go through, as they're putting up the envelope, interiors, other, and transportation and emission, or transportation and construction, utility usage, we're gonna same approach. We're gonna take the assumptions that we made and replace them with the actual installed values. And it really does make it adds another layer. This whole process does add another layer to even just like submittal reviews with the general contractor, because we naturally have a first cost budget. We naturally have a time budget where we need our materials to get on site at a specific time, and but then we're adding this embodied carbon budget too. So it weighs into our decision factor. And I think like one of the challenges that we faced was getting accurate data on these submittals, because we during the design we went through and picked materials that we thought would be like the optimal combination of embodied carbon, cost, right, ease of installation. And it wasn't until we actually got bids from these suppliers that the team at Hit Construction came and said, like, it's like, I know you've specified this one, but like and you thought it was going to come out the cheapest. It's like, well, that's a different story, and now we have a conflict between our first cost and embodied carbon. And so it does kind of like force you to weigh these things in a sense, to balance multiple budgets. So it's a complex process.
I'm curious, in terms of steel, was it totally just reduction in the amount of steel, or did you all find that there were some suppliers that somehow make it with less carbon?
Yes, and it's that latter. On the steel side, there are the key is finding a steel producer that uses electric arc furnaces rather than a coal burning or a gas burning furnace plant. So that was a big search, and we did find a few even in the Mid-Atlantic area. So it's just a matter of like, you have to tell the steel supplier you want your steel coming from that plant. We found if we didn't, it's interesting. Like if you don't actually specify that, you might get a mix. You might just get whatever they have on stock and inventory. or whatever plant is available at the time of your order. And so we did have to tell them like, no, we want that electric arc furnace plant, and they were willing to oblige, but yeah, we had to go do that. Find the sources that could supply that.
And that steel didn't cost significantly more.
Was that a cost to you?
No, and actually the overall, and like I'll kind of talk on the costs. The overall, like, we think the overall cost of this is, on a first cost basis, 5% more than what we would have thought we would have had to pay. And that's, and I will say, like the DC energy codes are pretty aggressive as it stands, and so they kind of force you, even just a code minimum building gets you to like either LEED silver or LEED gold, and so there's a bit of that in play, but no, I think having like it's not necessarily, we've kind of been a bit surprised on like it's not as much of a first cost standpoint. There is a significant time and effort cost. So on the development side, you need people tracking this. You need to hire a general contractor that has like a specialty embodied carbon team, and so there's a lot of like time input into this, but not necessarily like too many first cost premiums to the overall construction. And then once and now I'll kind of flip to once the building's operating, we did a lot during the design process to minimize our projected energy use. Some key points to that: we are fully electric. There's no on-site combustion sources. We do have a natural gas backup generator for life safety. So I should amend that bullet to say no on-site combustion sources, excluding life safety generator. And when based on the energy modeling that we've done, it's designed to use close to 50% less energy than the existing DC multifamily median. And I pulled that data from the DC benchmarking and energy performance benchmarking database. We talked about the renewable energy component. The on-site solar production will be about 220 megawatt hours per year, and we are retaining all rainwater captured on site to use for evaporative cooling in our cooling tower. The system is. I'm actually gonna reorder these slides. The system is a heat recovery approach. We connected every single thermal load in this building to one common loop. We in this phase, we have an anchor tenant, Atlas Brewing is coming in to expand their brewing operations in the ground floor, and we connected the heat, all the heat rejection associated with the brewing, and that's basically getting refunneled to heat domestic hot water for the residents. We have the cooling towers. It's heat pumps galore in this building, and there's multiple stages of heat pumps, but we've basically just connected every single thermal load. If it has heat in it, we connected it, and then we are also in design and more like in kind of in conceptual planning for some district style heat rejection heat sinks. We've looked into ground source heat pump. We're leaning more towards the sewer heat exchange. Where we are on our site, about 90% of DC's wastewater funnels right past us. And so we're in talks with DC Water to use that as a heat sink. It's a little gross, but that wastewater stays at 60 degrees to 70 degrees year round, and so that makes it a perfect heat sink for heat pumps. Yep.
What happens if the brewery goes out of business or? Yeah, I mean, like, does the whole system go haywire if they no longer have this anchor tenant for such a major component of the heating cooling system?
Yeah, and it's I think the answer is no. We have designed the system so that it can operate in a more standalone mode. The energy savings is dependent on recapturing the heat from that. And so if say like Atlas moves out and we fail to replace it with a similar heat profile, the building energy use will change significantly. But it's not, it won't fail. It will, it can still operate. It's just while Atlas is trying to reject heat into into the building, we'll have the opportunity to turn a lot of that equipment off.
Probably starting to run out of time, so maybe you could kind of start to wrap up.
Yeah, sounds good.
One thing in particular, if you can touch on, is some of the kind of challenges or incentives for development in general.
Yeah, and I think let's I'll close on this slide because I think there's a lot of it clearly takes a lot of effort to do all this carbon accounting, and so the question is like, why are we doing this? And in general, we just see a few long-term macro trends happening. Including like first is like we think like over long term, like residents are going to just require that their built environment matches their values, and so we generally think like the more we can provide assets that meet that demand, the better off our building's gonna perform in the long run. There's also, we also view some form of carbon tax or equivalent accounting programs, inevitable. DC, it's already happening. It's kind of happening across the U.S. As those gain more traction, our zero carbon building becomes more attractive to future investors that want to buy it from us at the end of our hold period. And then we're also seeing institutional investment look a bit more towards real estate to meet their ESG goals or environmental goals or whatever they need. And the key piece here is that they are definitely looking like they have reduced their return thresholds for what we're like for basically for a building type that we're doing. And so we don't, yes, the building costs a little bit more, but we don't need to hit the same goals that our competing building is doing. And so I think the whole message here is it's setting up incentives for long-term value creation, and that's where we'll see responsible development is if you kind of incentivize people that are going to think more long-term in their development process. They will I think they'll see the light here and do this as well. So yeah, that wraps up my spiel. But yeah, thank you everyone for having me.
Appreciate it. Anybody got one final question?
Not a final question, Daniel, but I do hope that somewhere you or somebody else is documenting this so that it can be captured and shared, certainly beyond this room and the people that are focused on delivering the project.
Nope, yeah, we absolutely are. It is in our interest too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So a couple of years ago, we get involved in, we hear a lot about a lot of the multifamily, large scale multifamilies here, multifamily buildings here in Arlington. And we've addressed questions about water heating and in large scale residential buildings. And we've been told multiple times that, if I recall correctly, it's just not economically feasible.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious about is that something that, because everything else seemed like it could offset that, but that would be an economic hit, and you're just willing to accept it because everything else was so energy efficient that it made it, you needed it to make zero, but everything else offset it? Or is that just because these people just really don't know what the state of the technology is?
Yeah, and actually, I will like kind of at the beginning of our journey on doing this. We faced a lot of pushback from anytime we went out to go get pricing data or anything like that. We heard the same thing. They were like, it's going to be that's going to be so expensive. That's not going to be worth it. Don't do that. And it just took like, we kind of said like, let's not believe them. And it just took a bit of like effort on our part to go find like, it's like, oh, if there's like, if we're talking like domestic hot water, like switching that to heat pumps, it just took a bit of effort on our part to connect and find an equipment supplier that is selling that type of system and building that type of system, for without the premium associated with it. And so we did see that, where it was like, we were just told this was going to be so unfeasible, and it just takes a bit of a push to get through it. But it is like once they're kind of on board, they're like, oh, I get it now, right? It's like that's not so bad.
And one more.
Sorry, Dan. I work in one of the buildings that was on your first slide in St. Elizabeth's, in the medical building that you listed. And I don't think that most of this stuff, I was wondering if there are different incentives in Ward 8 because DC has different rules, and how much that drove the decisions to just go for LEED silver there, although we ended up with LEED gold.
Yeah, I think the piece that really sealed it, like the piece that really pushed Bridge District to go to this scale is the opportunity zone designation, which really incentivized like the minimum 10-year hold period. I think combined at the St. Elizabeth site, there were other like it is a long-term hold for us. There were kind of other like stipulations and covenants that were a part of that larger St. E's master development planning that made it a little different in the development process.
Yeah. Thanks. I was wondering about opportunity zones because that building is in a new market zone, but maybe not and you are holding it for at least 15 years, I hope, since we have a 15-year lease.
Yep.
So anyway, Thank you.
Thank you, really appreciate it. Could you send to Jen and I these slides, and we'll share those with the commissioners, and just let everybody know is Eco Action Arlington is actually going to have Dan back for a webinar, and we'll have another speaker as well. So another opportunity to hear him and ask more questions in that. So and that will be on February 15th.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you. Their next agenda item was on the federal grants and budget. Was Demetra here or somebody here to answer any questions?
Demetra's not here today, but I will be taking questions and I can send those
Anybody?
This was sent, I think it was yesterday,
Yeah.
a couple days ago, for review, and if there were any questions.
I mean, I think it's really exciting that we're putting in for all these awards, and fingers crossed we actually get them, because that actually will give funding to advance some of the issues that we've been pushing of actually, kind of setting up mechanisms to make sure that, we're getting money to especially low income housing to address climate change and restructure or renovate. So it obviously is a clearly very complex process of what grants to put in for and how to put in for them and how to deconflict them.
Deconflict them.
Yeah, well, in terms of that, you can't put in a grant for the same thing. So so some things are going through Virginia and some things are going through the
Yeah, it looked like a great suite of. Jenna, do you know how you track what's available?
For grants?
Yeah, through what kinds of news and Federal Register and
So,
professional groups you belong to.
yep, so I'll definitely let Demetra speak more to it, but right now we do just keep on track of what the federal government has and what they're offering through their website, but I'm sure she'll be able to speak more to the,
What if you got all of them?
what if we did everything, doing everything we can.
One of them said denied, so.
Right. I just was looking and thinking, how many more staff do you need to distribute?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, is if these all get, or whether you can, the funding actually comes with
More
money
people.
to cover the staff.
Build it in.
I
I
know
would assume so.
that state governments across the country are literally like hiring staff just to apply for all of the current recently come out. And they've been asking the Department of Energy to fund like one staff per state just to be able to deal with the application, just be able to apply for all the money that's become
I would just repeat the words of Scott Sklar on the Energy Committee. Most of you know is that this period we're in right now is the golden age as far as government money, and every opportunity ought to be taken to catch with a basket the deluge of money that's coming out of and it may not happen again,
Right.
and it hasn't happened in the past, so every opportunity should be taken to get everything we possibly can.
Yeah. And one thing that's not here, and it probably isn't something that these programs are designed for, is that, we've kept this, we need this kind of one-stop stop for just homeowners to try to manage through the system. And again, it's like basically connecting them with where's the resources, how do they actually go about doing these things, because it's extremely confusing. And when you bring in a company and they say, well, just go with what you've got, which is usually fossil gas or something. So it's so as we get towards the budget, kind of thinking, whether we want to keep pushing that kind of separate programs where it's more, again, just advertising these things, helping make it a little easier for individuals to take advantage of all the rebates and that.
I can say that we're trying to there are a bunch of people who are trying to work with the Department of Energy to actually kind of maybe build a web platform. So any normal, there's a number of different user-friendly sites, like the Energy Star site on Department of Energy's website. It's just that none of them is really comprehensive. So you might be able to find great information if you're going to want to buy a new HVAC system, but everything else you'd have to know where to find the other stuff and all of it, as opposed to kind of a one-stop, even federal government site, because a lot of the programs come through HUD or from, if you're in a different kind of demographic area, the Department of Agriculture or something.
And I don't think we've got any budget information yet, so that should be released at the end of the month, so we'll keep an eye on that. I'll get it shared with the commission when it's out, and we can start thinking, because then we go into a pretty quick period of having to think about it and respond and provide feedback to the county board. So we've got our plans and priorities, if we want to bring that up. And thank you, Rob, for going through and making some of those language changes to get things a bit more specific. Did we have some outstanding questions on any of them? I think there may have been one or two.
Rob, so I just went through, accepted all of the suggested edits, but I
Okay.
kept the comments on the side.
Okay, some of the comments are now dated too, so I mean, some of the edits addressed to those comments, which were from the first round of review.
I had two minor points. I think it's like page 11, although it printed out, it said 6, but that's not it. It's toward the end. It's like 2 pages from the end.
Okay. These look like the first comments that are most recent. If you want to go by page. Skip through.
Well, Rob had the question on the stormwater utility, and I'm not sure that we necessarily need, because that really is mostly just a financial mechanism, but it does have the credit program. And I think, that gets somewhat subsumed in a very general way under, kind of addressing the stormwater issues.
So you don't think any further edits are needed to the act?
Not to the stormwater utility. I think for the commission's perspective, we probably want to kind of keep an eye on a little bit in terms of the credit program and what types of improvements could be made to that. One of the things I'd like to see is let's give people a credit for their tree canopy coverage and let it be automatic based on the LiDAR data that they're going to be collecting anyway for the tree canopy. In that way, because right now if you plant 2 trees, I just found out it doesn't count if you plant 1 tree.
Yes, yeah.
I got rejected. So.
What if your property doesn't have space for
Well, and again, that's the lot coverage issue that, again, we and all the other commissions are going to need to deal with.
That's the page.
Or you have 40 trees, but you haven't planted any in the last year.
Right.
Because
Jenna?
you're already camping.
Right, yeah.
I inserted some comments and some edits. I don't see.
Oh, did I?
I don't know if you refreshed this recently.
She accepted a lot of the changes to make it easier.
Was it a suggested edit?
There were suggested edits, and well, I first started commenting, and then I put in. Interesting.
This is the one that was edited. This is the red line.
Can you just scroll down? Yeah, so, okay, yeah, so the edits that I proposed.
Oh, we're on the. I think.
And I did include language, so like, for example, this green banks encourage and advise to adopt directing. What's the point of the green bank? So just like, do we want the creation of?
Yeah.
Like state what the green bank is supposed to do actually. So
yeah. Okay.
So I included language to that effect. Did you? I don't think we want to go through all of it. And I thought most of the comments and the edits from Rob and Joan were totally fine. I made some additional ones.
So that addition didn't take it. Doesn't look like in the clean version. So we just got to
that's my question.
Yeah. So we should.
Oh, not from today. I accepted this morning.
Okay. Got it.
So if you could just merge those.
Yep.
Are there any other? I mean, not that we have to go through them all.
No, it just.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to kind of get at what we're trying to achieve.
That's all. That's all I had on this.
So
I think it's much better.
Go ahead, some.
Just very minor on the part about the meeting schedule for the energy subcommittee, which I failed to fill in, I apologize, but.
I think there.
Up. More up there. Energy, yeah, energy subcommittee. So on the right-hand side, their meeting schedule, the second Wednesday of each month.
And actually, while we have that page up, is to point out is that we do have we will need somebody to chair the solid waste committee. Right now, apparently what Eric Gabrowski's intention is doing is there will be a meeting later this week on the 25th. And they will go over kind of the response to the comments. And basically, he's planning on disbanding the existing solid waste committee, which had been expanded just to do this process. And then after they pass the solid waste plan, they will restart the process, which tends to meet every quarter, and it generally tends to be driven by Eric updating on whatever they're doing in the Solid Waste Bureau. So it's not the engaged and active component like the Energy Committee is, which I find frustrating, but it's kind of hard to break that cycle. The more near-term thing is also what do we want to do on the fact that basically they're going to ignore most of the comments that we made. And that basically what they're going to push for the county board is pretty much what they sent out last fall, which probably means some engagement with the county board members of, are you really happy with this? I know Takis at the work session made it clear that he really expected that it needs to focus on waste reduction and not just, waste diversion, which is the way it's kind of structured now. So anyway, is there anybody that's dying to take over this?
Now that you made it so attractive.
It's a very important issue, and I think, as we're getting into, moving more from a community energy plan to a climate action plan. I mean, the embodied carbon of everything that goes into the trash is something we should be considering and taking into account and pushing policies that actually reduce that flow.
I had one question.
Uh-huh.
That I saw something in here that sounded vaguely revolutionary.
Okay.
And it may not be, but it was in the first section, the comprehensive climate action.
Yeah.
And it was under the county government leads by example.
Yeah.
And we're going to work with other commissions and community groups to develop consensus on how climate change should be reflected in budget and policy documents, plus greater influence on decisions and actions.
Yeah,
Pretty
that's
powerful.
something. Yeah, and that's something I'm hoping. Just for people who don't know, is actually Susan Cunningham will be our county board liaison now, and I think Cindy and I, hopefully, will be meeting with her later this week, and I think we probably need support from Susan and maybe even Bill Egger to kind of help facilitate, some sort of exchange between some of the key commissions. I'm thinking climate planning, transportation, housing, and then kind of our natural resources, Parks and Rec, and our commission, and kind of focus it primarily around the interchange between what those commissions do in climate change. So that we can kind of meet monthly, informally, that we can kind of share ideas. The Natural Resources Joint Advisory Group has done this fairly successfully for years, although now Parks and Recs wants to change that into an implementation advisory group and make it much less informal and useful, which we're not happy about. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and even broader is, again, the community is doing a vision then it will start in February. So, so that, and we should be thinking of how we engage on that process. So there's something on, I think it's February 5th. It'll be a series of presentations, and then for at least those that have been invited, which I have been, they will go actually have some tabletop discussions, and it'll start. But I have no sense at this point as to what the broader process would be. But again, you know, I'm always for and encouraged if there is, you know, how do we actually define some of what they're moving towards, and kind of play a role of making sure that climate is kind of front and center in anything that's part of a vision for the county.
I'll share one piece of encouraging news from, I happened to run into Takas and Susan on MLK Day of Service, and I was chatting with them. And I was just mentioned how Takas, you know, gave us all a great lecture on form-based codes at the last meeting. And she's like, I know I watched the video recording of the meeting and saw him do that. And I'm
That's
like,
great.
That is pretty
Yeah.
impressive that you're going to learn your commissions by watching recordings of these meetings, which may not be riveting for most of the population, but she's learning it, so.
Yeah, and my interchanges with her before even, we've had a lot going on in the background on the art buses. And she reads all the stuff that we give her and goes and picks up on small details. Maureen's almost the other way. I'm sure she'll read, but she catches the big picture too. So I think both of those are going to be good county board members. So look forward to working with them both.
I just have one minor issue then left, and that has to do with the intersection of the C2E2 members with the Energy Subcommittee, Energy Committee, and Suzanne Swink unfortunately had to resign for personal reasons. It lists Rob Sandola here, so I'm really pleased, Rob. To have you on the Energy Committee. That'll be great. We'll be meeting on the 14th, and I'll make sure that you get all the stuff. Wonderful. Thank you.
You are joining, or?
I will, the meetings will be tough. I told them,
Oh, well, because I don't know, the way you responded, it didn't sound like.
we can talk offline. I may be able to participate outside and comment on documents and stuff.
But surely we'll have chocolate covered strawberries for breakfast at the meeting on February 14th.
Whatever.
Now I'm so done.
If that would make a difference for Rob.
Yeah, well, maybe one day they can fix some of the virtual meeting issue that we can meet more virtually instead of having that in-person forum. Although I'm very pleased that you guys all show up, and we haven't ever had to not have a formal meeting because we didn't have quorum. So anyway, any volunteers for the solid waste committee? Keep that on the burner, but we do need to fill that at some point. Just not really happy about the way things are working out, but we really, you know, again, getting one or two people to kind of figure out, you know, what the best approach is to getting something that's actually better. And the other thing is now they're right up against the deadline as to when they're supposed to submit their updated solid waste plan. So they'll can use that to push it through. Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So the annual report. Anybody have any further comments?
I thought it was very well done. I would just suggest front-loading a couple of key highlights. Big line up front
Okay.
is what we call it. Put the bluff.
Yep, I remember that.
There's a
You read a lot
typo
of
last
You
name.
read a lot of memos.
His last name? So I got a couple of key points up front.
Listen, I agree with Eric. It was really well done.
Yeah.
It looked like we've done a lot.
Well, we actually have. I mean, go back and
Just
look at
looks
the
like
letters. I mean, we've sent more letters last year than probably the 2-3 years combined.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody have a sense that we're sending so many that they don't get attention? I don't have that sense, but I don't have my finger on the pulse.
No, because they pretty much each get, especially a lot of those letters with the SPRC. So
right, they're
where
very
they,
targeted.
yeah, and where there's something they're voting, it goes in the package for the county board, and so I think that they do tend to read them. So
This is similar to what's been done in previous years, John?
I think,
The annual report, you mean?
This,
yeah, somehow we kind of missed last year's annual report just because it kind of was, but yeah, I used the kind of the frame for
okay.
previous years and then just,
I recall
kind
the
of change it.
count of 2023 SPRC projects is higher than the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's been
So it's been a very, very busy year, so. And this year is probably going to be just as busy.
Did you write this, John?
Yeah.
Nice job.
So that it for comments. Have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That.
And is this just for internal distribution?
Published.
It will go to the county, yeah, it's published on our website and it will go to the county board members.
Then definitely the sort of key highlights.
Yeah, okay. Maybe to kind of move things around, I did put the brainstorming and the visioning next. Do we want to do that or do we just want to go ahead and get the letters out of the way? Can go either way.
I would say the latter first.
Yeah, let's get the
That's
letters.
for-
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's get the, which one is this? Update to the form-based code. Okay, so Elizabeth, you want to kick us off?
Sure. And thanks for the opportunity to draft the base text on an issue I knew absolutely nothing about before this initial meeting. I hope it doesn't show too much. But I think we heard that the form-based code can be an interesting way to encourage developers to go beyond what the county can require, but it does remove some of our ability to put our imprimatur on some of the environmental negotiations as part of the site plan review committee. So we have to strike a balance between trying to load up the form-based code with great environmental requirements and still making sure that it's an attractive option as opposed to going through the review process where we're maybe influential, but it doesn't become a requirement. So we highlighted a number of areas where the updates could be strengthened. It's, I think, probably a good thing that they're going to be looking at requiring LEED Gold or Earthcraft Gold standards. But it's not really clear that it's at all harmonized with the Green Building Incentive Program plan. And so Joan sees that arrow line a lot more clearly than I do, so I turn it over to her to explain how we would want these two policies to marry. But if you scroll down, Jenna, we can go into the sort of 4 or 5 specific items. One is one that Joan added, the efficiency standards exceeding the ASHRAE baseline. You probably need to add a little bit more verbiage around this particular improvement. But I think it was really inspiring to hear from Red Brick that if you just get over the idea that doing something more environmentally friendly is automatically going to be more expensive, there's really no reason to shy away from exceeding some of these standards.
Can we just like, I had no idea about the steel thing. Can we just put in here, like, to be able to keep our form-based code, you have to buy electric arc furnace
Yeah.
steel.
Yeah,
I mean,
from this one place.
well, no, he said that there are multiple, he said there's, you just have to go out and look for it.
Yeah.
And he said it's no more, I think he said it's no more
5%.
expensive. He said the total project was 5%.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, but he said the steel, I think he said the steel was.
I think I heard it differently. I came away thinking that the steel was 5% more expensive.
No.
No, I thought he was talking overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and as we go to or just a separate section on the embodied carbon. And, do we, and this was, kind of, how much do we want to be fairly prescriptive in terms of, as Dan was talking, is that they're using the EC3 and they're aiming for 30 to 35%. We could say something of 10 to 15% or something, use it. I mean, I think it helps to point to that there is a baseline there somewhere that we can start with and what's, and in it, we can throw out a number of what we think is, and this is all going to get discussed and negotiated, and we could start with something higher and knowing that it's probably going to end up lower. But the point is to, have that expectation that anybody going into this is going to be producing the embodied carbon in the building.
And it sounds like it depends on scale too.
Yeah.
Bigger, smaller buildings.
Yeah, and renovated buildings would be different. But again, then again, at that point, there's so much embodied carbon that they're saving that they already kind of can check that box off.
So I suppose that I didn't include energy efficiency at first because I assumed that the LEED Gold or Earthcraft Gold would incorporate an energy efficiency standard, but
not specific. It's not called out, and that's why, the Green Building Incentive Policy now has the 24%, which is an update that just went into place last year. So, and we've been saying we should expect at least a 25%. So again, I think because these standard certifications are, a whole menu of options, and doesn't necessarily mean that, they can achieve gold and still kind of miss, and that's where we see it on the electrification. And actually we see it on energy efficiency time and again. They're usually committing to the lower levels. So, it's kind of what's the minimum we would expect. Again, we just saw a project that they're looking to get 44% reduction in multifamily, medium multifamily, which I assume is probably including both new and existing, but we, if we can kind of, but I do think, kind of start to set some of the standards, and this is actually going to help define what we expect for green building incentive policy minimum.
Joe, would it be accurate to say instead of over 25% more feasible, would it say more planned? Is for most of the buildings that we reviewed? I'm not sure if that's true for all of them, but I think a lot of the buildings that we reviewed, they had, when they did the Energy Star, or the what do you call it, building portfolio manager analysis, the plan level was over 25%.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that was what I was kind of getting at. But even that project, they just committed to 20%.
Yeah.
And we're going to have that same issue with Goodwill. Is and it makes sense because there's no incentive for them to actually commit to something that they know they can achieve. Because what happens if they don't? Because they have to put down money, and if they don't meet their commitments, they give up some of what they've put into escrow.
Under promise, over deliver, right?
Yeah, right, yeah, except that, it's kind of, we're setting the wrong incentives.
No,
there.
no, I'm just saying, right, like,
We don't know whether they're over delivering or not. And then, of course, they're all say, well, we're only at 30% design and we really don't know. As opposed to, yeah, well, it's again that there's no incentive there for them to try to really go for what the most they can get.
So in addition to energy efficiency, we wanted to have a conversation about what we might want to require with respect to buildings being either electric ready, all electric, or zero energy ready. And I think we'll probably need to come back to that, but just to kind of give an overview of the other sections. Number 3 is regarding EVs.
Can I ask before you get to that about the 30 to 50 years buildings are constructed, 30 to 50? I didn't know. I thought it was 50 was
He said 50.
Yeah, that's the industry standard.
And you looked at, you got a source of that? Okay. Good.
Yeah, I thought about doing footnotes, but it would be like for
No, I
every
didn't want,
sentence.
I was just surprised. I didn't know that anybody actually planned to tear the building down after 30 years.
Yeah, it seems a little short, but the contrast is to, how quickly we want to phase carbon out of the building sector, which is in at least, preferably now, but in at least the next 2 decades. Then focus on EV ready because retrofits are enormously expensive and inefficient, and particularly with respect to multifamily buildings, they often get left out of the EV transition. Then finally switching the open spaces standard to biophilic design principles and green infrastructure. Really just having open space is fine, but we can certainly encourage folks to go much further, which they wouldn't necessarily think of biophilic elements if they are encouraged to believe that just having open space is sufficient green space. And then
Can I make
embodying
just a comment on that? Because I was going to do some wordsmithing at one point, and I decided not to.
I welcome
This has
it
been
because
changed.
I personally am headed into like a very busy time, but I don't know if I can get this one across the finish line. So
That's
certainly
why
welcome another pen.
I don't, but I just wanted to make a point here. Some of this stuff with green infrastructure, as we talk about it, it's important to recognize, I think, that to make so-called green infrastructure work, you need some gray infrastructure that's part of it. And there's a tendency, which is common in this county, to talk about planting a tree as a solution. It is often part of a solution that needs some other work. And that's, some of the best things around, like green roofs and that sort of thing. There's a lot of engineering that goes into that to make that special. And it's not just plants by themselves. Yeah. And I just think, I didn't want to take it with this at all. But I just think when we talk about it in the future, we need to be careful about what that is. If you're talking about urban heat islands, you're going to do some gray infrastructure to make the plants succeed. Well,
right.
So, and I just wanted to make that suggestion.
Yeah, well, we might want to think about adding something in like that. It's just not a biophilic narrative, which right now is what's in the green building incentive, but something that's more expansive that would identify and quantify the reduction in the green building incentive policy and, meet a minimum of, if we want to set, 10% of tree canopy coverage, which I don't think many of those come close to meeting. Is just, or even more. I mean, for the Langston Boulevard, they said 20%. Yeah. And or up to 35%. And we could use that as an example of, they should be setting it based on what the long-term goals are for wherever the long-term goals are for tree canopy coverage, and establish requirements that they actually adhere to tree canopy coverage that actually meets that.
Along those lines, they're going through the SPRC process. They can negotiate, okay, we're going to give you this if we get more density or more height or something.
Mm-hmm.
Does the form-based code say if you follow these things, you get more density, or is that?
Well, it basically means you don't have to go through the SPRC process,
right.
And you basically kind of build
to whatever. Time.
Yeah.
You're not waiting on
right.
permits. Yeah. I get that, but
yeah.
Is there any extra density or anything they're given? They follow all these.
I think it might follow along with whatever the sector plan is that actually probably sets density higher than what the straight building to code would be. Because this is an incentive program, so it's an incentive to go beyond what code would be.
Because that's also the opportunity to say, in exchange for greater setback, more trees, greater canopy coverage, you get to build another story to make up for it.
But I think that's exactly what Takis was saying last time, which is you don't have to go through piecemeal negotiation. It's basically, this is what you by right have in terms of density, but if you meet these form-based code collection of standards, you get this extra density, and you just have to check the boxes and show that you've done it, and you don't have to piecemeal go through all the different negotiations of the SPRC process.
It's a process.
Yeah, well, I know they're definitely saving on time, waiting on permits and stuff, because just show you've done it, and then you move right along.
Yeah.
So that's a huge change.
Well, not just move along, but move along and get this additional density.
Yeah, that was it. So could we add more, not just open space, but space to plant biophilic elements and canopy trees in exchange for what they're going to be getting?
I think so. I mean, this is at this point our kind of way of laying out is, we think that, there should be set descriptions of how much tree canopy coverage is expected, and plus other biophilic elements or reduction in heat island.
Because otherwise they'll build right out to the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we gotta,
and
you can't plant a tree if there's no space.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of the form-based code and that, defines some of that would actually address some of that.
That's the trick.
But,
Sorry if I missed this the first time around, but if it's voluntary, how is is there a process of verification?
well, they've got the checklist of the county has to go in and confirm that they met their obligation.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the form-based code is primarily a look and feel of the building. And with none of this kind of sustainable. So in one sense, passing that even as it's written is improvement from what it is, but is that really what we want to see achieved?
I think the intent is not to give the developer a pass on all the environmental requirements that would accrue from going through the site plan review process, but that's effectively what is happening with the form-based code, is they are getting a pass on all these things. And we didn't even know it was happening, so we didn't have a chance to be part of the negotiations for a lot of these. Then there are a number of smaller recommendations that are sort of outside the inclusions to the code itself. At the bottom, if you could scroll down, Jenna, it's just the last couple paragraphs. So considering holistic neighborhood goals like tree canopy and stormwater management, harmonizing with the green building incentive policy, tying Form-based codes to external standards that update themselves, so it doesn't need to be updated as the code itself, and potentially including a seat on the working group for somebody with a background in sustainable design. The charter doesn't say anything about any kind of environmental goals or standards. So certainly that there is hopefully room to have that kind of viewpoint on a going forward basis on the working group itself.
Come back to that first sentence. You want to say the forthcoming update to the green building incentive policy? I mean, there is one right now and it's being updated. It's not like a brand new one is going to be created.
Yeah.
So in front of green building incentive policy, insert updates to.
Yeah, update to singular.
Update to.
The leadership of the AIR team has been so tight with whatever is being planned in that regard. So I'll pass that along to whatever staff members happen to be here for this particular meeting to share to the extent you deem appropriate.
Not to put you on the spot.
Sure, that'll be warmly received.
Yeah, well, and that's the kind of question, I think maybe if we go back to that first, end of the first paragraph is, do we as a commission want to suggest that they wait until after they actually update the green building incentive policy so that it can better align?
Yep.
Yeah.
I would strongly endorse that. Because these are going to be two very different debates. Form-based code is the folks who are going to be involved in that, not the same kind of folks who are going to be talking about green building incentive.
And just, what that aligns to, actually, I think this should be a little bit more stringent or something as opposed to right now they're building in the minimum, and that's going to be outdated, hopefully, even whatever the minimum is on the update. So that question or that final paragraph, and I would bold highlight that, is that what, let's just postpone this first, at minimum, just update it to something that actually is a bit better than what the minimum GBI is, but really consider waiting until after they get the green building incentive policy. And I suspect if it's postponed, then it's going to be probably working in tandem anyway, because it's a several month process to really engage. But I mean, they had limited public engagement as far as I can tell. Certainly they didn't reach out to us until December. So.
And what is the timing now?
It's supposed to go into, because we have to approve this letter tonight because it goes in front of the county board on next month. So we don't meet before then, so.
So the update.
Just not on time.
Pardon?
The update.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, we do need to get through this.
Is there no visibility into what that timetable is?
Pardon?
The GVIP, the
No.
update to the
Yeah.
GVIP.
Well, I think
Maybe
no.
start with that
The
and
last-
say, hold off, just wait.
The last PC meeting,
Yeah.
said
I think it's one of the most important messages. in the
Public.
letter.
the public reveal of the updated green building incentive program would not be available before the next DC meeting, which is February 14th.
So end of February.
So after February 14th.
Yeah,
Earliest.
So I think, I mean, you know, kind of there's several criteria there of what we're really expecting is, you know, it needs to be consistent with our own policy, our own goals. It needs to, actually, it should reflect, and we heard tonight, what some of those best practices can achieve, and then align with the green building incentive policy. So,
I like this revised sentence, Joan.
Or how about just say, like you say it later in the letter, that it just reflects whichever version we've got. Right? It follows the green incentive policy now, and then once that updates, it follows that. Because
yeah, well, we can give kind of different options, but I suspect they have to go through the whole process of updating the code. Although they could do it through consensus if they're really sticking and adhering.
we don't want the green building policy incentive to be updated in the formula code. In the future, down the road.
Right.
They should be in sync.
For that next change.
Actually, that next paragraph is just taken word for word from our standard letters.
Looks fine to me for, we need to approve this tonight, I think we should do that. Yeah. Period at the end. And, left up to bylaws.
I mean, on the first one, do we want to set in, you know, it's estimated that in DC, you know, they're actually, there's a building, a large multifamily building going up that's expecting 44% savings in or medium energy. Of course, that probably isn't the same as the ASHRAE baseline, so that probably is mixing apples and oranges. So, yeah, and again, on this one, I mean, we've been asking for all electric buildings for so long. I don't think we even want to quibble about electric ready. Yeah, then just kind of picked up with our standard.
The rooftop solar and battery storage. I want those things.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they fit in the paragraph or turn into standards that could be on the form-based code. No. 1 and 2. Yeah, that, I think we added a new number 1 and then the rest just didn't auto number. And if that one's bold, the rest should be.
Should we do that last one as a 3?
I think that's the second point, so I think that's good.
I just don't know how it gets adopted into a code.
Well, the encourage doesn't really. I mean, maybe not focus on backup storage at this point.
Does zero energy ready imply that it's capable of easy rooftop solar installation, or it already has rooftop solar?
Well, you can get off-site renewables as well.
Before 3, that's in the sentence.
Yeah. I mean, do we just want to kind of just have a sentence there and, you know, each project should try to maximize rooftop solar space? I mean, it's kind of hard because you can't give a total number because it depends on the space and what else they may need to use the roof for.
I think it's, it's fine to make a point, to put a period at the end and not expand upon it. It's self-explanatory and won't translate into the code. So, but it's a point we can make.
Back to the update of the GBIP. Are we saying hold off until the GBIP is updated?
Yes.
Yeah.
And are we confident that we want to align with that at this point?
It depends on what it is.
I mean, but that's the, so if you're saying align, well, what if we don't, what if we don't like the update?
Postponed, and then we'll see what's in there.
Okay, but I thought I saw align with the updated GBIP.
I mean, almost by
Can't be worse
definition,
than,
right.
than not having anything, which is what they've got now. so.
Right, and I,
So
like,
we'll
the
take it whatever
GBI,
it is.
yeah, it's gonna be better,
It's going to be.
right? Like,
better.
you can't make the enemy the, whatever, perfect
Okay.
enemy of the good.
Answer.
And, you know, we do know, like, my understanding is it's going to have for the first time some stuff in there about things like heat islands and stormwater.
Yeah,
And
okay,
they're
so,
planning,
So these are things that are not currently in the policy.
they're planning tax incentives and things like that.
Fair
So,
It's,
you know,
frankly, if anything, it may be surprisingly big.
okay,
Yeah.
great,
That'd be great.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
but whether or not they're, and because is, you know, is there going to be something that's kind of, here's a minimum of what we expect for every building, and then we're going to try to provide a lot more incentives that would encourage people to go the distance. You know, we just.
Okay.
So rather than keep updating the form-based code, so this is just a question, can we recommend that it tied to the latest version of GIP?
And that's what we kind of hit at the end, is find some way of, you know, updating it so that it doesn't, because otherwise, I mean, right now, they're in a position is, they pass the ordinance and you already know it's going to be out of date from what the updated version is going to be. So, and I think that last sentence takes care of that. Now, I'm wondering whether kind of separating out the embodied carbon. I mean, I kind of like the idea of actually forcing developers to tell their tenants how much they're going to pay for utilities, which is not something that's, you know, permitted or required in Virginia. But I think, to me, that's separate and embodied carbon because that has to do with the buildings. And, you know, if we kind of, you know, set a requirement for, you know, reducing embodied carbons, you know, at least 10, 15% more than, you know, as a base, at least as a starting point, more than existing, you know, development practice or building practices.
I will say the reason that I combined these into a single bulleted number is because it seemed to me like disclosure was the sort of leading standard for both. Like there wasn't a clear way for a code to require certain embodied carbon standards, especially if at the end of the day, we want developers to opt for the form-based code to get these things. It seemed like if we went further than requiring disclosure, we would potentially be getting into a space where it wasn't worth pursuing the form-based code route.
I like the idea. of transparency, right? I mean,
Maybe something is we can kind of fall back. I don't tend to like this, but is requiring that all developers present a narrative of how they're going to reduce kind of, strategies that they're going to take to reduce the embodied carbon, life cycle carbon, or embodied carbon in the building. At least, at this point, it's forcing them to. I mean, I would want the green building incentive policy to actually have targets for reducing embodied carbon.
are you saying instead of, I mean, this is.
I'm just saying,
simply
and that 6 at the end of the paragraph,
So
just
they
add
do
a
report
sentence.
of some kind of what they've described the measures.
Yeah, just kind of, and I think we can work in somewhere along the way, maybe with when we talk about open spaces, is also a narrative that would get specifically at, meeting at least a minimum of 10, meeting, kind of 10% tree canopy coverage, and a narrative on reducing the urban heat island impact. Again, kind of forcing them into thinking about these things.
It's a marker.
Yeah.
For the future. If you got the GBI thing, then they'd actually have to meet standards.
So people comfortable with the sentence at the end of this one on metrics to just talk more about a narrative on reducing embodied carbon and improving or reducing utility costs for consumers. That's a little bit redundant with the energy efficiency, but that's okay. And then the other one is do a similar sentence. If you want to just make a notation of add sentence at the end of that paragraph under 6. No, at the end of the paragraph, not the. Yeah, right there. We'll add a similar sentence to the one on open spaces. Kind of, a narrative on, meeting at least a 10% tree canopy coverage and providing and how addressing reduction in urban heat island.
Before we approve, I am still a little bothered by the sort of structure of the number 3 that we added. It really doesn't seem to fit, in my opinion.
What's number 3?
This is the rooftop solar and battery storage. I feel as strongly as I can about a letter, but that's not very, very strongly. So if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted, but it doesn't seem to me to fit in a code or in the structure of a letter. So I would move to strike that one and see if we can address it maybe a different way by mentioning those things as opposed to elevating them to other solid requirements that we're asking.
Maybe add it to the
paragraph right above.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
Just say one strategy to electric is to maximize.
Right. That works for me.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's it.
Well, example strategy to electrify, I think.
Well, that's getting renewable energy. I mean, I think it's in more of an in addition, achieving, net zero energy use of, the building should maximize use of rooftop solar.
Yes.
And battery storage in order to
achieve net zero, not to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. To achieve net zero, and then we'll fix language.
Was that supposed to be, number 2 supposed to be all electric or net zero energy or just zero energy?
Zero energy ready is like
That's
a
actually
brand name.
Brand, right?
Not really a brand name, but it's its own concept.
Yeah. And then on the open sources, I'll add a sentence there on the narrative for urban heat island in that and tree canopy coverage. Okay. So, anybody got any other changes?
Impressed we were able to whip this into shape in just
Well done.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a little wordy.
We started with a great product, so thank you.
Yeah, that's a good, okay, do you have a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Well done.
Good job. Okay, and then we've got the second letter, which came up a little bit frustrated on the Goodwill site. They're really expediting this plan through because they had the first SPRC meeting last month and they had the other one, the second one last week. And I'm like, you haven't given me any sustainability details and you're going to the county board next month. And we still haven't gotten too much in the way of details and nothing in the, other than that it is going to be all electric. Now, they're also, from a sense, they're going into this as environment is one of the issues. They're looking at zero carbon standards. They're looking at a whole bunch of different certification mechanisms, even though they're just going the Earthcraft Gold. So at least I really want to think that they're really going to strive to get to a really good building. And since it's all electric, that's a good starting point. But on the energy efficient, you know, first they sent me something that said 40%, and it's, they're, wow, that's wonderful. And then they came, oh, no, not really. We're thinking it's more 15 to 20%. So they got to meet 20%. The thing is that the process that they're doing it from, there's, you know, they're not looking at some of these details. They haven't done, or at least they're not sharing an energy model, which is where we actually pull a lot of our information. So, you know, I have no idea what the systems are that they're using. It's just, I will trust them that they're all electric. And, you know, again, Earthcraft's pretty good for insulation and building envelopes. So I would suspect they'd end up with higher rates of energy efficiency. So I really tried to caveat this in ways of not going beyond what we have. I'm going to try to talk to them before the PC meeting. So, you know, at least when I go in front of the PC and the county board, if I've got something. I mean, as I said last week, it's like, I really want to be excited about this thing.
Joan, do they, forgive me for not knowing this, do they have any process fouls by not submitting sustainability documents? Does that violate any county?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know that, you know, other than maybe we started seeing the energy models on a regular basis a couple of years ago. We had the same issue with the Marabella because, again, they were doing Earthcraft and it just, whatever. So they're kind of out of sync. I mean, the other thing here is, and this is where you can see the problem with the green building incentive policy, is, you know, most of them don't need that high level of density that you get at the higher levels, which is actually where we want these companies. So they promise the minimum of what they need. And even for a project like this, they're really looking at the building to design from a sustainability perspective. They're not, you know, they're basically kind of signing on to the minimum. And
Can you even say it meets most of these criteria if you don't have enough information?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, so it seems like a contradiction, like you're saying,
Yeah.
oh, 78%, not 77%, not 79%.
yeah.
But you don't, there's all this stuff that you don't know, but you just said you don't know.
No, actually, I went through basically what we do know is they're going for the green building incentive policy. So for a lot of things, we can just say they're meeting the expectations. So that kind of gets you the baseline, and then they get kind of pushed over to the higher level because they're going all electric, which is usually where we do not meet expectations and which drives the number down. But, you know, again, if they have.
It seems higher than usual.
It is higher, but that's on the electrification.
Yeah.
Is driving that. And I had it up to 83%, and then they sent me data on the EV charging that it's like, okay, I don't know what you're doing for that. So we'll just go back to the minimum.
So again, this is just a process question, especially in light of the revisions to the Green Building Incentive Policy. And maybe this is an SPRC question, not incorporated into SPRC, but I was frustrated too with Red Line with that they were making changes to site designs and doing things, they showed improved biofuel, but they didn't resubmit sustainability documentation that shows, right? So should we and can we be recommending to the county or to the SPRC that they not only submit this the first time through, but each time it goes through the process that they update those, rerun the models? Is that something that we can recommend, or?
I suspect that when you're changing the facade and things like that, it doesn't, because these are just models and it's based on a whole lot of assumptions. So unless you're really changing something big, and they're really not doing, I mean, they've never come back to us and say, oh, you're right, we should go all electric and we'll replace the system with that,
Yeah.
It's like, so.
They shouldn't be able to even move to the process if they don't even submit the sustainability documentation, right?
Well, they submitted the Earthcraft goal, the Earthcraft standards, which is really hard to interpret because it's very different from the lead. And even with the others we always get, and it's usually more the energy performance, or it's just, they're required to do 20% energy efficiency, because you can't even draw that out from the lead documents. So, but again, it's just not here. So all we can do is, they're doing GBIP, so therefore they have to do 20%. But I think they can do a lot more, and they may well do a lot more. But
yeah, I mean, the letter sounds like they're doing a great job, pretty much.
Well, again, it's.
But we're not quite sure because we don't have all the data.
Well, that's what I'm trying to convey. Like, as I said, it's like, I really want to be thrilled with this project. And again, maybe, when I talk to some of the designers, they'll give me, a lot more details that I can at least verbally convey. It's like, they think they're actually going to get much higher. I mean,
if they go the other way, I guess you could verbally convey that too.
Yeah, or just if end up at the end of the day, it's not much, then it's the kind of, they really, we hope they continue to, as they work through that, they get a much higher energy efficiency. Again, they're really committed to doing things that are right for their tenants and the people that they're going to serve in this building, which is kind of why, and they list environment as one of their design principles. So.
Can I ask you, would it be useful on that 78%, which I can tell people are kind of reacting to?
Yeah,
I am too a little bit. Could you be phrased as if the commitments they have made?
No.
It could be as high as 78%.
No, I don't think it would go below that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm pretty much, because again, kind of giving them, and I actually gave them a little extra for the equity thing, which is always kind of hard to figure out. But again, they serve a diverse population, so.
Oh,
We could say, based on the available information we have,
yeah,
we
something like
score
that.
it, so that way.
Yeah.
It's an objective,
Of course,
right, it's an objective sort of thing, like, if we assume that we assume what they've written isn't a bald-faced lie.
yeah, put that in.
Yeah.
No, but like, we assume that the information we have, based on the information we have.
Information and representations.
Yeah, that it will meet the criteria, the objective criteria that we have stated in this format to meet the 78% score. And I mean, we built that platform to have an objective output as much as possible.
Yeah.
And it meets that.
Mm-hmm. No, and again. Do we want to make the comparison with others? I mean, it is better than the other ones, but it's the electrification that's driving it. which is probably one of the most important things.
Yeah.
When we get to carbon
Could you
neutrality.
just highlight that in particular and say in particular?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what state.
Yeah.
They just put related to electrification. I'll fix the language. That really is the primary thing.
Like you need to delete and more information. That last sentence.
What's that?
Just those three words. And more
Right under the highlighted.
Oh.
So previous.
Boilerplate language for the next one. Other than certification. Again, I think they may end up with lower kind of life cycle carbon emissions, but no details. Again, that's something as we're looking to update the checklist, we probably want to be more specific on how we, account for embedded carbon. But that needs to be somehow built into the green building incentive policy broadly that they expect accounting for it. Okay, yeah, as you can see, this kept getting changed throughout the day. I was so excited. The 40%. That I don't know about backup systems.
Right, and we heard Dan.
Yeah, even them, they're
Yeah.
hurting. That's again,
That's what
for a long time, that's going to be a stretch
Yeah.
for any project we have. But I think it makes a point of kind of having it on our list even as we kind of up the ante.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed at the SPRCs is everybody says we're going to be fully electric, and then they say, oh, except for our gas generator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we'll take out the backup systems. So yeah. Just take that
It does strike me that if you
Almost.
add an on-site battery, you're probably running that backup generator much less than
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
as your first backup.
Yeah.
So it should
Right.
Ideally be redundant.
Yeah. Electric vehicle charging. They seemed to indicate that they were going for the higher. Is that Susan?
Susan.
They seem
Could
to
be a different.
Yeah. Seemed to think that they were going for the higher, but they were unclear when they got back to me today. So we'll just kind of. So that actually. Or what probably it may commit to.
They're gonna put a playground right there?
Yeah, it was a child care center. Yeah, no, on the electric vehicles, I think we have to may commit to 10%. And maybe start the sentences, they will definitely, they'll meet the minimum green bean, but may, as part of their extra points, commit to. Because I think
It has committed, they commit.
Yeah. I thought I had changed that back again. So, yeah, so right now, they'll definitely meet the minimum, but they are considering doing it larger. So if you mind, I'll just fix the language to account for that. So, okay. And again, that's another one of these big buildings taking over most of the landscape, but if anybody knows that intersection, and I'm sure most people do, is it will be an improvement. And they did make some changes they got rid of some parking spaces in the front on Glebe Road and put in more landscaping. And they've got trees all along the exit ramp from Route 50. And they're doing what they can with the playground.
It's a good point about shade, though.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awful without shade in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah, and you make these comments and they just nod. Oh yeah, we're right with you. We agree. Okay. Maybe instead of appears, could be on track.
The details when they are forthcoming.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Meet the glowing praise.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I really hope it kind of, because the thing is that it seems when it's affordable housing, they're much more willing to make the extra step than these commercial developers.
I move we approve the letter subject to making this one.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I think we're past time.
Yeah, I think we are past time, and I think people are, yeah, and I really would hope we could do some brainstorming. Do really think about, I mean, we've got so many different irons in the pie that are all starting to come together with the, update of the community energy plan, or talking about a community climate action plan, the green building incentive update, and then the county's getting ready to launch a visioning session. When will that happen, Joe? That starts in February. That's all other than they're having something down at Met Park with, by invitation. It will be streamed so people can watch at least the presentations. I'll send out the details.
Is there anything one can figure out with this visioning thing?
No. But, hopefully they'll tell us more, and I think I've seen it in plurals of vision.
It'll appear to you.
Next month, are we going to hear anything about kind of what's being done on Richmond? Obviously.
Yeah, we could probably do an update. Actually, if anybody wants, I'm running a email alerts for, environmental legislation that's happening. So if somebody wants to sign a letter or something as these things go through commission.
There's no hope for reforming the building codes, is there?
No, there's nothing on there on stretch codes as far as I can tell at this point. So maybe next year. Yeah, mostly it's energy efficiency improvements to the VCEA. Solar, a number of solar things. Data centers are big. I'm not focusing much on data centers, but so yeah, send me an email if you want me to add you to my alert list. Hey Susan, how you doing?
Hey guys, I just wanted to say hi and thank you. I'm looking forward to joining you in person one of these days, but
Well,
thanks for staying
hopefully
late. I know it is late.
I think we have you on the calendar for next month.
Perfect. And were you guys asking about visioning, like the Arlington 2050 thing?
Right, yeah, kind of understanding
I
what
mean,
the process is gonna
I've
be.
been very deeply involved for 3 whole weeks, so I know everything. But I can tell you what I know, which may be more than everyone else knows. Did someone get an invitation from your group?
I got an invitation.
Okay. So, and that's just for the kickoff, which is
That's
space
for the
limited.
kickoff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the kickoff. And it is a little bit of an amorphous thing in part on purpose because the board wanted to do something that's not being done to the community, but with the community. And so this is sort of a kickoff where climate, demography, education, and business will be sort of the frame, and then to get people talking to each other. And then I think it's going to look like, and your guidance is welcome, but we're trying to get more of a distributed, faith communities are having the conversation and softball teams are having the conversation, and then things are coming back in versus like it feeling or being a staff led or board led, this is the answer. Do you like answer 1 or answer 2? But you know, how that's going to come to be is still a little bit in fluid. So, but the goal is to like have those conversations this year, see if something bubbles up, which I think it probably will. And climate will probably be like the anchor of one of those visions from what I've heard in the community. And then, you know, towards the end of the year, figure out now what do we do with that? And do you want to use it next year to guide things?
Sounds like it'll be an interesting process. Thank you. And
All
welcome
right.
on board.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you
Take
next
care,
month.
everyone. Be safe going home.
Building setback probably, or building footprint.